Most people will never know this. The Federal Reserve, the so-called Central Bank of the United States, was never federal. It was never created for the people. Its purpose was not stability, fairness, or the protection of citizens. Behind the curtains of democracy, a small group of powerful bankers plotted in secrecy. They held the fate of the nation in their hands, and the public was never invited. This is still happening today. The mechanisms of control are invisible, buried in legal frameworks, financial policy, and digital systems that the average citizen will never understand. In 1913, the United States faced repeated financial crises. Bank runs were common. Citizens lost their life, savings overnight. Panic spread through cities and towns. Ordinary Americans had no idea that a solution was being crafted behind closed doors, a plan that would put private bankers in control of the nation's money supply, its credit, and even the government itself. Most people will never know this, but the events of that year laid the foundation for a system where the government relied on private banks. Debt became the engine of growth, and the majority of the population was left dependent on the few who controlled credit. Here's what they wanted to see. The Federal Reserve Act was drafted in secrecy, far from journalists, far from public scrutiny, and far from lawmakers who might ask questions. It was pushed by the wealthiest financiers of the era, men who had accumulated vast fortunes and influence. Citizens were told it was necessary to stabilize the economy. They were promised protection from financial instability. The reality was far darker. The system was designed to centralize power, concentrate wealth, and ensure that crises could be engineered and managed by private interests. Interest rates, access to credit, and the currency itself were placed under the control of the few. This is still happening today. Every policy, every financial tool, every economic intervention is a continuation of the same design. The architects of this system met in secrecy at Jekyll Island. Not a single journalist was present, not a concerned politician. Only the most powerful bankers and financial minds plotted how to reshape the United States monetary system. Most people will never know this, but the plan was simple and ruthless. Give private banks control over credit, currency, and government policy. Every financial crisis could be orchestrated. Every intervention would protect the elite and consolidate power. The Federal Reserve was never intended to be a public institution. Its structure ensured that private interests would dominate, while the public was left with the illusion of oversight. By the end of 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was quietly signed into law. Politicians assured citizens of progress and security. Few understood that the law allowed private banks to manipulate the money supply, determine access to credit, and shape national policy at will. Citizens thought they were protected. They were being trapped. Most people will never know this, but from that moment onward, private banking had legal authority to dominate the economy, engineer crises, and profit while ordinary Americans bore the consequences. This is still happening today. THOs of 1913 resonate in every financial panic, every bailout, and every interest rate adjustment. The 1920s revealed the system's true power. Banks expanded credit aggressively, inflating asset prices and luring citizens into debt. Ordinary Americans borrowed heavily, believing the system would safeguard them. In 1929, the stock market crashed. Millions lost their savings. The Federal Reserve intervened selectively, stabilizing the elite while the masses suffered. Most people will never know this, but the pattern would repeat for decades. Booms and busts became tools to manipulate society. The Federal Reserve controlled not just money, but the trajectory of entire generations. This is still happening today. Crises are manufactured, solutions are orchestrated, and the cycle is unbroken. During the Great Depression, the Federal Reserve's policies worsened unemployment and prolonged economic suffering. By the 1970s, inflation soared while interest rates fluctuated under their control. Nixon killed the gold standard in 1971, unleashing fiat money and giving central banks unlimited power to print currency. Debt became a weapon. Governments became dependent on the decisions of private bankers. Most people will never know this, but their lives, their work, and their wealth are governed by the very system designed in 1913. This is still happening today. The tools have evolved, but the underlying control remains absolute. In 2008, the pattern repeated. Major banks deemed too big to fail were rescued with public funds. Ordinary citizens faced unemployment, foreclosure, and economic devastation, while private institutions were stabilized. The Federal Reserve printed trillions, manipulated markets, and protected elite interests. Most people will never know this, but quantitative easing, zero interest rates, and emerging digital currencies are extensions of the same century-old plan. This is still happening today. The mechanism is now digital, instantaneous, and nearly invisible to the public eye. Now look at the 2025 to 2026 timeline. Central banks are rolling out digital currencies, programmable money, and surveillance of every financial transaction. Every dollar, every purchase, every credit decision can be monitored, scored, and controlled. Credit is no longer a private agreement. It is a tool of governance. Most people will never know this, but the principles established in 1930 in private control, government dependence, and crisis management are fully operational. Interest rates, stimulus programs, and central bank policies continue to serve elite consolidation. This is still happening today, and the reach is global, automated, and nearly impossible to escape. The consequences are already visible. Property ownership is eroding under institutional pressure. Credit access depends on compliance with opaque rules. Small businesses and local industries struggle to survive under financial and regulatory constraints. Wealth concentration is accelerating. Asset managers, central banks, and elite corporations now control a majority of the nation's assets. Most people will never know this, but the system is programmed to perpetuate itself, and resistance is increasingly difficult. This is still happening today. The same pattern, perfected over more than a century, is now fully operational in the digital age. The ultimate truth is unavoidable. Those who benefit are central banks, global asset managers, and corporations that influence policy and control capital. Those who lose are ordinary citizens, small business owners, independent farmers, savers, and anyone who believed private property and independence were guaranteed. Most people will never know this, but the system ensures that wealth and power remain concentrated. This is still happening today, and it will accelerate unless the public understands the invisible mechanisms shaping every economic decision. The question now is clear. What do you truly own? How free are you in a system designed to consolidate wealth, track behavior, and enforce dependence? Debt, programmable, digital currencies, and central bank surveillance ensure the same outcome envisioned in 1913. Most people will never know this, but every financial instrument, every policy, every regulation is part of a machine built to maintain control. This is still happening today, and unless you recognize it, it will continue to govern your life in ways you cannot imagine. If this video woke you up, drop a like and subscribe. New forbidden truth every single day. Turn on notifications. The next one might save your wealth. Comment the one thing you're doing right now to prepare. I read every single one.